If something tragic happens in your life, you want to reach peace. This morning, we'll show you how. Coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Collectors Cafe and Art Gallery on Kings Highway in Myrtle Beach between 76th and 79th Avenues North. We're focused on Project Reach Peace. And we're visiting with the clinical director of the Coastal Samaritan Counseling Center, Dr. Jim Remington. Good morning, Dr. Remington.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for coming in. Do you mind if I call you Jim?
I prefer that.
You take that on a Monday morning.
Really,
early.
you bet.
A real opportunity. Of course, a lot happening. You all kicked off the opportunity to kick off Project Reach Peace. Excuse me. I mean, you kicked off some trials, and it looks like they were very successful.
Yes. Well, we found out that there's a certain kind of dynamics that go on in people who've had a loved one murdered, which is different from having a loved one die of old age or an automobile accident or something else. And this came out of a client that I had. I learned a whole new field about a loved one who's been murdered that I simply didn't know before.
I'm having difficulty even trying to take that in, Jim. When you think about a loved one that's been murdered, and of course the statistics are, tremendously high.
They're tremendously high, you know, and I think they're going to get worse. I don't want to get into politics, but it's almost like we're becoming immune to death and to violence, and I'm afraid all of this is going to continue. What I like to do with people to kind of get a feeling on what's going on is focus on a child or a grandchild, someone that you really are close to you, and imagine someone coming in and deliberately, intentionally killing that person, often brutally. I can't quite go there. I can think about it, but I can't quite go there. That's why our group is facilitated by people who have lost a loved one. I, as a mental health professional, am on the sideline. She is the one who leads the group because she's been there.
Right. You actually have someone who has not only lost a loved one, but lost a loved one to murder.
Yes, exactly
who's
right.
had a loved one murdered.
That's right. She's the one, she was the initiator of this group and is really the main facilitator when we have our group meetings.
Is that common for folks in facilitating, whether it is the persons who've lost loved ones to a car accident or to just old age? Is it common to have a facilitator who's not a therapist, who is someone who's experienced that? In this instance, obviously someone whose loved one was murdered.
I think it's critical in this case. In the other cases, I'm not so sure. But in this case, I know it is critical that a group is going to need to be led by someone who has lost a loved one brutally murdered. There's just an intensity there that you don't pick up just with book learning,
right,
or even dealing with some of the other. In our area, there are grief and recovery groups, but there are no groups specifically designed like this, and that's why we're excited about offering this to the community. There is no group like this.
For the trial runs that were held in September and October on those Sundays at 6 p.m., are you comfortable sharing with viewers just what those early sessions were like? I mean, just to give a sense, if, as you said, you were on the sideline, of how she could kick off a session to bring people into the fold to help them.
Yeah. What happened during this group is that it confirmed some stuff I kind of knew intellectually, but here I saw people really sharing it, the hurt that they're having. And what goes on with this kind of thing, it never ends, for example. If you have a loved one die, you have a funeral, a grieving in it, it sort of slowly gets better with the passing of time. This doesn't happen with a loved one because usually the justice system is drawn out. The one lady who's in charge of our group, her son has been dead for 2 years, and the perpetrator still has not gone to trial. They keep postponing it and postponing it. So here, every time there's a trial or a postponement, the person has that hurt all over again. Then projecting forward, whenever that person comes up for parole, these family members are committed to going there and testifying against parole. So this may go down 1 or 2 generations.
Right.
You know, it blows my mind. And the lady has told me, she said, I'm gearing my children and maybe my grandchildren that when this man comes up for parole, our family is going to be represented there. If it's not me, then the next generation back. So it never ends. It just goes on and on and on.
And the desire is not to, and of course, obviously, Coastal Samaritan Counseling Center, whether it's Christ-based or not, I know y'all interface and have some churches support you all, along with being a United Way partner. But there's not a, in that instance where it's the children and grandchildren that are being encouraged to be there on parole, you know, some folks would step back and say, will there be a point where it's forgiveness and where you let it die, essentially, and that person's going to have to live with it no matter what?
You're putting your finger right on a real critical area here. What I'm sort of picking up from the people is that eventually, and I underscore eventually, eventually there's an element of forgiveness, but not an element of forgetness.
Right.
So they may forgive you. You're a child of God. You violated God's law, but I still try to honor that. But you still took a loved one out of my life.
Right.
So I may forgive you at a spiritual level,
right.
but humanly, I'm still angry at you for what
right.
you did to my life.
Right. Very good point. If a viewer needs to get off to work now or get family off to school, what's the best way to reach? Is it picking up the phone and dialing the 843-448-4820 number?
Exactly right. Please dial that number. And as you pointed out, we did have a trial group.
Right.
And now we're waiting for the community to let us know. We have some people out there that want to be a part of our next group. So
right.
we have a group all ready to go in Dynamics. We're waiting to hear from people. So if they will call that number.
And it's highly confidential.
Oh, absolutely.
Folks can maintain anonymity.
Absolutely. Calling in anonymity and even sitting in the group. You do not have to reveal anything about yourself if you're uncomfortable doing that.
That's right. Well, there's great information at coastalsamaritan.org about the Coastal Samaritan Counseling Center. A lot of trained professionals like yourself as the clinical director. You're dealing with everyone in there. It's a small group, I think you pointed out, but you all are United Way partners supported by
right.
lots of churches.
Well, what I think makes us unique, and of course I'm biased, is that we are faith-based. Now, there are other mental health agencies, and I'm not putting them down. I don't go there. But our staff has a faith basis to what we do, and it's pretty apparent. Now, we're professional counselors, we're licensed counselors, but we have a faith base that helps us identify with people who come in really hurting. Now, if they have a particular faith, we will identify it and help them find what's basic in their faith that will help them deal with the problems.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, if someone comes in and has no faith, we still relate to them.
Yes, yes.
But we
as
are
counselors,
and
they know that you all are, I mean, whether they have a faith or not, they recognize your role as a faith-based counselor.
Right, and what we're finding out is that a large percentage of people who go for mental health services initially contact a pastor. Mm-hmm. So a pastor is in a unique position to make referrals to us.
Mm-hmm. That's simple, those three words, faith-based counselor together. Which comes first, the counselor or the faith-based aspect?
It's all tied in together.
Right.
I don't think there is a first.
Yeah.
I think that it's all one big package.
Right.
The better word we like is faith-integrated counseling.
Oh, that is better.
Okay,
yes.
I like it a little better.
Yes.
What that means is all of us are trained. All of us are licensed. All of us are experienced. But in addition to that, we have a very personal faith that we bring into the counseling of. Now, we're not proselytizing. We're not out there to convert.
Good,
we're not out there to change anybody's religion, belief, or add to it, whatever it may be. But we do have a very confident assurance in God that God is still in charge in spite of what you've experienced.
The Project Reach piece, this would be open, or would there be a cost associated with that?
Absolutely not.
Right.
We do not put any charge on this.
Okay.
No, this is something that our agency feels very strongly about and offer it to people who have a need.
The other staff counselors, there is a cost for therapy, oftentimes much lower than they would have to pay in the, quote, open market. But since you all are a 501c3, I suspect, a corporation there, you're in a position where you can pass on some of the benefits.
Yeah. We never turn anybody away because of finances. That's an absolute with us. Now, what we're finding is that many churches, in addition to United Way, many churches have us in their budget, often in the mission committee within their budget. So many churches understand that the majority of people coming to us either do not have insurance or cannot afford to pay the full rate.
Right.
So they make donations. We have what's called a reduced scale. Mm-hmm. And basically, when you come in, you will write down what your income is. And then the secretary will say, well, this is a suggested amount, But if that's difficult, then when you get in with your counselor, it can be negotiated.
That is tremendous,
Never turn
Jim.
anybody away because of money.
I don't think there's anything of its kind in this area.
You know, we think it's important.
That's fantastic. CoastalSamaritan.org, or again, picking up the phone, 843-448-4820. For our viewers, as you know, a lot of our viewers are in the PD and southeastern North Carolina. Even though they're not right here in Horry and Georgetown, the ability to be involved in Project Reach Peace is, I mean, folks will maybe traveling in hours to be a part of that. There's probably not many groups of its kind in this area or in the southeast.
The closest group that I know of is in Columbia.
Okay.
We really expect people will drive some distance to come here because there's not very many groups. There are no groups outside of this immediate area, and I don't know how far out.
Right.
But we expect people will drive some distance to attend these groups.
Right, right. That's why it's so important just to pick up the phone and call and try to, and your goal again is to know that the numbers are there so you can justify having those on a regular basis. At the same time, if a viewer may have the need to talk but you don't have enough folks to justify having the seminars, they're still able to call in and seek counseling.
Yes, indeed. There are two parts to really good therapy. One is the individual part of it. The other is a group therapy. In many instances, we will meet with somebody on a personal basis to begin with because they may have some hang-ups that prevents them from opening up to the large group. But my own preference is to have a group because there you have the sharing, the camaraderie, the understanding that all of us have been there. This is my experience. This is what I suggest to you and so forth. So there's something about a group that you can't really get one-on-one counseling.
You highlighted both here orally as well as in writing in the pamphlet about Project Reach Peace that folks can maintain anonymity even in sitting in a group setting.
Oh, yes.
And oftentimes do you find that whether you deal directly with folks that have lost a loved one to murder, do you see that those persons are oftentimes even scared to go out because if it could happen to their loved one, it could happen to them?
Indeed. See, it's sort of, you're pointing several important things here. One thing is that people who've had a loved one murdered are fearful that that person or someone that person lines up may also come and get them.
Right.
That's a big hunk of it.
Right.
The other hunk of it is that they're reluctant to come out to other people because they have a hard time knowing that other people can really understand where they are.
Right.
And that's where the reluctance, that's why this kind of program is so important, to let us get out to the community and invite them to come in.
So critical that your facilitator has experienced this herself.
Indeed.
So very important. Real quick about yourself, Jim. Are you originally from the area?
No, as you probably can tell by my voice, I'm a Yankee.
Not too much, actually. The South has kicked in very well.
Okay, right. Yeah, I'm from Michigan, and I have a long career history of involving both theology and in psychology.
I saw that, and also the author of 3 books, Jim.
Right.
Wow, what a feeling to put pen to paper to make that commitment. I saw one was regarding the fear of flying.
Yes.
One, a spiritual investigation in Peru.
Right.
And another one, of course, divorce, healing, and recovery.
Right.
Divorce, healing, and recovery. The father of 3 and the grandfather of 5.
Right.
That idea, again, trying to imagine if you're one of your own 3 children.
Right.
Or one of your 5 grandchildren who you've cared and caressed and stroked their hair and laid down with them in bed and told them stories, was the next week gunned down in oftentimes a senseless murder.
Oh, almost always senseless. There's no reason.
Excuse me, I guess it would always be a senseless murder. I mean, senseless, yes, but not oftentimes premeditated. Oftentimes murders are...
Yeah, and in addition, it's often brutally done. It isn't that they shoot you, but in the case of the lady whose son was murdered, he was shot and stabbed and then decapitated. They actually cut him up. So, you know, it just goes on. It's just almost beyond comprehension.
Those facts and figures, 16 every 10 weeks, 3,000 people are murdered in the United States. Each year, over 16,000. But the one that really struck me was 2 people per hour. And during our 30 minutes here this morning,
that's right.
Here on a Monday morning, potentially 1 person will be murdered in the United States of America.
Right. And even though we're in so-called paradise, we have murders going on here and there will be murders that will continue to go on here. So again, even though it's paradise, what we're talking about is not a part of paradise, but it's a reality of living in this area as well as living in other areas.
Absolutely.
It's happening here.
Some of the, you highlighted the ability to forgive, potentially, oftentimes, for the persons, the loved ones of a murdered, the loved ones of a victim there. And they are themselves then victims, clearly, because their loved ones been killed. But the forgetting, the difficulty therein, what are some of the senses that persons are experiencing? What are some of the feelings that they're experiencing, aside from the fear maybe that someone connected to that murder is going to come after them?
Angry. They are just absolutely angry. This was somebody who came into their lives, took their loved ones away for no reason whatsoever, and now that person is in jail, having 3 meals a day, watching television, everything's taken care of, and my loved one is out there in the cemetery. So anger is a great big part. And some people, and this is difficult for them to work with, some people carry their anger to the point of being angry at God. They will often say in the confidential setting, where was this God of love we talk about? Why didn't that God of love protect my son from being killed? So this is one of the many things we have to work through, is initially being angry at God for what happened to their loved ones.
And obviously it would take a long time during a counseling session to answer that question. But if you were given 30, 60 seconds to answer that question, where was God when their loved one was murdered? How do you respond? Obviously in loving, in kindness, but how do you respond to that?
Well, I think a part of it is there are some things we don't know. You know, as a Christian, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And the Scripture, no. And the Scripture talks about we know a lot on this side, and some things we won't know until we're over there. I have to believe, and this is where my faith comes in, that underneath all of this is a loving God. And in a wider picture, boy, this is tough. In the wider picture, the person has benefited from it. Now, tell someone who just lost a loved one, they say, yeah, sure. But if we really believe in an afterlife and eternal life, and we don't know if that person would have stayed here, what kind of life they would have had. It could have been really miserable. What we know now is that they've gone on to a better dimension. Do I, as a human being, hurt? You bet. I hurt like everything. But if I can kind of back off a little bit, God is still in charge. I'm not going to blame God for doing this, because I think there's a wider God picture that I may not be totally tuned into at this point.
Jim, your sessions, and again, not to get into sessions directly, obviously much of that's confidential, but just generically, your sessions with a Christian versus your sessions with somebody who's not necessarily faith-based, themselves coming in, do you begin, for instance, sessions with prayer and end them with prayer, or never?
We are very, very sensitive to the faith or lack of faith the person brings in. Now, remember, again, our main task is clinical. It isn't theological. If they have theological questions, we will refer them back to their minister or to their priest. Okay? We will deal with clinical issues. Now, obviously, theological issues may come in, and we will deal with them as a clinical perspective. But strictly theological, then they need to go back to the leader of their faith community.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's very good. You had 5 sessions on Sunday nights during September and October. Some of the things you got from that, from some of the people. How did you find people to attend the sessions? I mean, did the different churches open the door or folks just found you? They knew there was a need there. Yeah,
we really were not out into the public enough, and that's why I so appreciate this program. And again, the bottom line is we need to get out into the community and know that this kind of help is available, and hope that people will respond. You know.
Yes, obviously there'll be a way to go through the rolls of murders that have occurred in Orion, Georgetown, or Marion, and Brunswick County to let those folks know you're here. But so many people retire to the area that may still be smarting from the loss of a loved one, who have moved here to get away from Michigan, for instance, or from North Carolina because a loved one was murdered there. And so really, as you say, getting the word out, folks need to pick up the phone, 843-448-4820, as you said, entirely confidential. Everything there is maintained in strict confidence, so they can say, I want to come whenever you're going to have a session.
That's what we're hoping. And the other thing, you're right on target here, Greg, is that A lot of these people have never dealt with this as an issue.
Right.
They've just suppressed it.
Right.
The buzzwords is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right, which is one of your specialties.
Yeah. And what we find out, if you haven't dealt with a trauma like that, you suppress it, but sooner or later, it's going to come back to bite you. And so we find people that we really believe that 20, 25, 30 years later, if they didn't deal with the trauma in a healthy way, this thing is going to come back and haunt them.
Oh, yeah.
And this can happen not only with war and other traumas, but a loved one has been killed. That's a trauma.
Right. Of course, we read recently, and obviously everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but the loss of a loved one to a drunk driver, which is I'm not sure if that's premeditated or if that's murder, if that fits into your numbers, but reading about the father of a child who came after potentially, again, innocent until proven guilty, but came to someone's home with a gun and wanted to take that woman's life because, so I'm sure, as you say, a lot of pent-up feelings that are constantly going on there. And during a group session, do you find that you're able to see some of those, that they're opening up? Obviously, you're a fan of group sessions.
I'm a fan of group sessions, and when you have a group, there's almost very few boundaries of what you can do. Now, you can't hurt anybody or hurt yourself, but if you feel like yelling or screaming or pounding the table or just sitting absolutely quiet, that is a right you have in this group.
Right, right. That's very important, Jim. You know, when you think through, obviously, that idea that 16,000 persons are murdered on an annual basis in the United States, your fear is that it's going to get worse.
I'm absolutely convinced it is, and I hope I'm wrong. But what I'm concerned about when I look at the news is almost an immunity to death and violence and so forth. And again, without getting political, I think what is happening worldwide, it's becoming more and more a violent and hostile and hurting kind of world. And I think that's going to trickle down to our community. I think there's going to be an increasing amount of murders. I hope I'm wrong.
We've just got a couple of minutes. Obviously, the focus here is Project Reach Peace. How'd y'all came up with that name? There's clearly other folks that are suffering through the loss of a loved one, whether their loved one's committed suicide or is killed by a drunk driver or going through others. Coastal Samaritan Counseling Center is available for all of those persons.
Right, and the name, like everything else, this has been an easy thing for me because all I've had to do is sit back and watch somebody who's experienced to it. The name Reach for Peace came from her. She said one of the things that's difficult when you lose a loved one is to find any kind of peace, because there's always a lack of peace with the justice system, the parole hearing, and all of that. So she said you never really get a lot of peace. So she said what we need to do is name our group Reaching for Peace, and have that be as one of the goals of the group dynamics, is to help you attain as much peace as you can at that time.
Has she attained peace?
Not yet. It's only been 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's way too short.
2 years. No, boy, that is. What is in the pamphlet here, and it was a tremendous pamphlet, and again, if someone called the 448-4820 number or goes online, they can see some great information of the pamphlet, which I stuffed into my pocket. But there's some great info that highlights, oftentimes it's not only weeks or months, but even well into many years while they're going through the both forgiving and maybe never forgetting stage.
Yeah. And if people call us, we'll be happy just to send them a brochure on that pamphlet too. And that will give them a good idea about the group.
Absolutely. That forgetting piece just will not take place. So the amount of time, is there some expectation for our viewers if they can't attend, or if they're scared to come out and attend, or they don't want to be in a group setting? Of course, you'll continue to do one-on-one, but what are some things that viewers at home right now could be doing to help just to help themselves through this stage if they've lost a loved one to murder?
It's a good question. I think a simple answer is to allow yourself to feel your feelings. Many of us feel something and then we beat ourselves up for feeling it. I shouldn't be feeling that, or I ought not to, and so forth. And I think a good solid place to start is that whatever I'm feeling is okay for me to feel. Now, acting on it is something different. But I have the right to feel what I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling pain, anger, hostility, frustration, it's okay. What we call that is responding normally to an abnormal situation. So all of those feelings are appropriate to what you've experienced. Feel your feelings.
Feel your feelings. Those are great words, as you said. Not always acting on those feelings.
Right.
Not always acting. I saw one of your specialties was dealing with, and of course the brochure highlighted oftentimes abuse of alcohol or drugs slips in, even inappropriate sexual activity, a lot of potentially crazy things when you want to feel those feelings, but not necessarily acting on those feelings. One of your specialties, I believe, was something related to sexual dysfunction. I mean, you know, just acting out a lot of aspects you want to make sure folks don't always act on.
Right, and we feel this is one of the values of the group. That you come here, you have people who accept you just as you are, you can be genuine who you are, and in the process of talking about and living some of these pains, you're less reluctant to go out and do stupid things or crazy things.
Right, great words. Thanks so much, Dr.
Thank you,
Remington.
sir. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Thank you very much.
Sorry we've run out of time.
Appreciate it.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Dr. Jim Remington coming up next. Set in at an early stage, early in life, he determined he could either sit on his pity pot or make the best with all he had. And he's obviously done that. Couldn't you feel that in the last 25 minutes right here early on in his life, afflicted with polio at 6 months? His father deserted him at 6 months, right around that same time. Did you see any hint of that at all the last 25 minutes? Not at all. Constantly moving forward. The focus was getting back on those victims, the victims of murder. Folks that have been impacted by their loved one being murdered. This is a real opportunity to make a difference, not only by him, but the facilitator there, the woman who was impacted by the loss of a loved one just 2 years ago, a loved one who was murdered. Take the time, pick up the phone, 843-448-4820, 448-4820. Go online to coastalsamaritan.org. Tremendous opportunity. They're there for you. You heard him say it. Feel those feelings. Take the time to feel those feelings. Recognize that those are feelings you're having for a reason. Feel them. 448-4820.